First of all, Dame Louise, I mean, you talk about how the term grooming gangs is kind of a sanitised term for what's been going on here. What's the unsanitised version?
Well, put bluntly, it may be a rare occurrence, but when it does happen, it's multiple occasions that you're multiply sexually assaulting multiple people, multiple perpetrators, multiple victims. So one rape is pretty traumatic for any human being, but to have these sorts of crimes perpetrated against you on multiple occasions when you're an adolescent or a teenager is terrible.
And in many cases, a already vulnerable adolescent or teenager.
Well, that's the thing. The thing about the men, and they are men largely, that perpetrate these sorts of crimes is that they know where our safety nets are weak, and therefore they go after girls primarily who are young, who often have had histories of not being able to be brought up in their own homes because of bad parenting or child abuse. They then end up in children's homes. You've got plenty of examples of where they know the young girl is or young woman is vulnerable because of a learning disability or mental health problems. They ply them with alcohol, they ply them with drugs, they make them think that they're in love with them. They show them what they think is love, and what they're doing is drawing them in. And then obviously and child sexual exploitation is for sexual gratification and power.
This report today is about grooming gangs. We talked a lot about, there's a lot of talk about grooming gangs, and yet your first recommendation, something you feel very strongly about, is actually about the definition of rape in this country and what it does and doesn't cover that may surprise many people.
Well, I mean, I did an inspection 10 years ago into Rotherham. And when I was in Rotherham, I met a slightly no longer too young woman, and she told me what happened to her on her 13th birthday. And up to that point, I had assumed that our age of consent, 16, meant that if anybody did those sorts of crimes to a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old girl, it would automatically be rape. It's not automatically rape from the age of 13, 14 and 15. And I was shocked by that then. I think many members of the British public would be shocked by that now, that they have to prove that they didn't consent to it. And
Victims.
And they are victims. And I don't care what state that 13, 14 or 15-year-old is in, to put it bluntly. If you do to them, you should be punished with rape, mandatory sentence, the same way you would be an 11 or 12-year-old. And so really coming back to this 10 years later, this is still as important now as it was then. And I think that it would really help, deal with this crime if people that were doing it knew that we would prosecute them for rape. And to be blunt, when you've got a very vulnerable 13 or 14-year-old that thinks that she's in love with one of these men, if we were able to say to her, we're going to do him for rape, that may upset her, but I'd rather take that than I would 5 or 10 years later she realises she's been multiply abused and she's traumatised for the rest of her life. So I think we need a defining moment to say what our children in this country, they're under the age of 16, you can't do this to them, and that we see what we're trying to do here today, what I'm trying to ask people to do here today, as a reset moment for the country when it comes to our children.
Although you acknowledge that there has to be some protection for children who are engaging with in sexual activity with each other. Have you worked out in your own mind how you protect that group?
I can assure you that what we don't want to happen here is teenagers that are in, relationships and experiments are getting locked up. I am not worried about the criminal justice system and all of the lawyers working that out. Do you know what I mean? I think it's an exception that we know how to get it right. It happens in France. France has already got the legislation that rape means rape. No excuses, no ifs, no buts until the age of 15. So we know that other countries can do it. We know how to do these things in this country. We're pretty good at legislation. I have no qualms that will not be a difficult thing to do.
Going back to the grooming gangs, we know from years of reporting, from your work in Rotherham, that there has been an ethnic basis to some of this. How angry are you that the ethnicity of perpetrators is not, in most cases, being recorded?
So I think it's almost a dereliction of duty, really, that we haven't, as a state, as a country, as a local area, the people that should be collecting this information haven't done it. And the reason I'm angry about it and feel it's just dire is because we're not helping the victims. And to be honest, we're not helping the communities such as Asian and Pakistani heritage communities. Who do we think we're helping when we don't collect this data properly? Which is why I've asked for mandatory collection of ethnicity and actually nationality data. So it's just what we do. It's just what we do. We collect age, we collect sex, we collect nationality, we collect ethnicity, and then you can start to work out what is going on. And one of the reasons you've got to work out what's going on is you have to understand your problem to know what to do about it. And if you don't understand it, this argy-bargy about whether it is Asian or isn't Asian actually helps no one. Helps no one at all. Doesn't help Asian communities at all, doesn't help Pakistani communities at all, it doesn't help anybody at all. So I think getting to the bottom of it was the right thing to do, and that hasn't happened.
Just to be clear, even in the areas where this data is collected, although Asian men have been overrepresented, they're not the only perpetrators, are they?
Oh, good. No, sadly, there are plenty of men of all ethnicities that actually abuse children, are violent to women and commit rape. So the one thing all of this has in common, I'm sorry to say it, but it is largely men that perpetrate this violence. And I think part of the issue has to be that we're letting down boys that grow up in this country if we don't see that the vast majority of men are decent human beings. Of course, they don't commit any of these sorts of offences. But I often say to those decent men, could you step up and help deal with all the lads that are growing up that actually need to see you as the role models, and that these perpetrators we see as a minority. So everything that has in common. I mean, the data set we have from Greater Manchester, which is a very big data set of live and historic cases, shows that when it comes to child sexual exploitation, it is largely Asian and Pakistani heritage, not 100%, but disproportionately. When you look at child abuse offences, i.e. largely in the home, people that you know, often younger children, they're largely white, and that shouldn't be a surprise because that's a majority population. But for sort of white men sitting at home tonight thinking this is nothing to do with me, it's not, I'm afraid.
Yeah, so what is your message to, I mean, it's a very difficult problem. What is your message to men sitting at home watching this? What should they be doing? What should parents be doing to fix whatever is going wrong here?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I think the first thing is that the best thing people can do is be loving parents. And, I've got friends, I'm not a parent myself, but I've got friends, including their own children. I've got nieces and nephews where we all know where we are each other 24 hours of the day. And people, I think the best thing we can all do is be good citizens. I think that keeping an eye out of what's happening in your community is always helpful and useful. And on the issue of violence against women and girls, of course there's a role there for men in order to, and you can see people like Gareth Southgate, Sadiq Khan, you can see a host of people trying to say, come on, let's do something better here. There was the Australian football people that went out only a couple of weeks ago in Australia that just before a big match, where normally there's high levels of domestic violence after that match, player after player went and said, get a grip, don't do this when you get home. And those sorts of things I strongly endorse.
We've got to talk about the issue of the public inquiry, which has been a matter of intense political debate. Keir Starmer says he changed his mind on a national statutory public inquiry because you changed your mind. Why did you change your mind? Well,
I mean, can I just say that the national inquiry is a political issue, and I'll tell you the answer to that question in a second. But the thing here to remember is we want some law changes, not just around consent but others. I want a national criminal investigation, which is as important, if not the most important thing that happens that comes out of this, so that we go and get perpetrators now better than we're doing, and we go back to historic cases. And then, yes, I think one of the things which I did change my mind about is I thought at the beginning of this, Alexis J did a very, very good 7-year review into institution and child abuse. And I thought to myself, do we really need to, all the noise and haste and the shouting and people saying, oh, we now need to have another national inquiry. I was thinking, I don't think we do, actually. Don't we just want to go on and go and get the bad guys and lock them up for a long time? And then it became clear to me that, for example, the government announced in January, when they announced the fact I'd be doing this audit, that they would support 5 local areas to do inquiries, and they put some money down. Only Oldham said, we'll do it, and that we want to do this. Nobody else volunteered for that. And so I'm thinking, where's the reluctance here? And then I looked at Andy Burnham, the mayor in Greater Manchester, had instituted some assurance reviews. I put them in the report. You can see the reluctance of people to cooperate with those assurance reviews, people lawyering up so that they didn't have to share data. Then you look at the serious case reviews. I looked at 50 of them. None of them mention the perpetrators, and when they do, it's only 15 of the serious case reviews do they actually talk about the perpetrators. So across the board, I thought to myself, I'm sorry, this isn't good enough. We're not going to do this to the victims, and we're not going to let people in these local areas not face some sort of accountability for what they did. So yes, and that's why what I'm asking for is a statutory inquiry, a national inquiry, but that essentially leads a series of local investigations that gets to the bottom of what happened on a locality basis.
You have said that institutions shouldn't have to be dragged kicking and screaming into accountability. Do you include the government in that?
I don't think the government has been, actually. I mean, to be fair, they haven't even been in power for a year, and like 4 months ago, in the midst of all of this, what the Prime Minister asked me to do was to establish the facts. He didn't jump to a national inquiry just because everybody was asking him to. He said, no, I want to get an audit done. I'm going to find somebody that will tell me the truth, which is always my conversation, whichever Prime Minister has called over the years. I say, are you sure it's me? And that was the same conversation, and then we've done this deep dive, we've established the facts, I've laid the facts out, including the issue of denial and reluctance, and the package, I hope, will go forward from changing laws to a national investigation, a criminal investigation, and also an inquiry to look what's happening in local areas. And that feels like the right type of package for us to say, enough's enough. Children first, victims first, let's get this done and move forward.